Hello everybody, Matt here, back again with another video for you. Today we're going to be taking a look at my 80s soundtrack collection. Yes, a bit of an obscure category, and one, honestly, I thought about it and I thought, what could my next video be? And I thought, well, I could do one over the 80s soundtracks I have, and I thought, I don't have enough material to talk about that, and I basically cleared out my entire soundtrack section. So I'm just going to run through the 80s soundtracks that I happen to have here in my collection. And the 80s were just so cool. It was just such a great, pop culture time, and I was born in '88. So I missed out, sadly. But, I got the 90s and the 2000s, so that was fun too. But when it comes to collecting soundtracks, I love collecting soundtracks from the 80s because there's so much good stuff that's there. There's a lot of like oddball stuff, sure, and a lot of new wave stuff, but I mean, a lot of it is really, really interesting and fun to listen to. And it's the bulk of my soundtrack collection. So we're going to take a look at what I have in my collection here today. Starting things off here, we have the classic with Ghostbusters, Ray Parker Jr. here, with his very cool title track here. And this has, I don't know if that's the original packaging or not, but this was actually one of the first records I ever listened to. I remember I discovered the movie Ghostbusters when I was probably about 5, and asked my dad, could you make me a tape of the soundtrack, and he did, and it was love at first sight. And I actually had this record in my room for a long time. I just thought it was so cool to have that logo up in my room. Moving right along here, we have the iconic soundtrack to the film Footloose. This is a great example of just one of those 80s records that it's hit after hit after hit. And for some reason, Kenny Loggins is on a lot of these records. I guess he was just a popular dude. But this has some wonderful songs on it. I really like, obviously, the title track. And, let's see here, Heaven Helps a Man. That's a great one, too. Great soundtrack, great film. Very iconic piece right there. Very, very cool. I think when they remade it, they really made a big mistake there. Moving on here, we've got the classic film E.T. With the score provided here by John Williams, doing a fantastic job here. 1982 was when this came out. Same year as a lot of other things, namely John Carpenter's The Thing, which competed at the box office for this. Everybody wanted to see friendly aliens. They didn't want to see scary tentacle aliens, but, whatever. My goodness, I mean, one of Williams' best scores right here. One that, continually, this is one I listen to a lot just because it's an incredible piece with a lot of iconic moments within the score. Very, very cool piece here. And another one that's not for retail sale. They marked it for MCA. So just kind of a cool piece to have in the collection here. This marks the 3rd time I've talked about this. Christine, amazing soundtrack. Classic 80s horror here. What can you say that hasn't already been said about this? This is one, I'm so happy I got this. As it's just like one of the funniest movies ever made and one of the best 80s soundtracks ever. The soundtrack to the movie Caddyshack, featuring more music by Kenny Loggins. He just keeps popping up here, as well as Any Way You Want It by Journey, one of the few Journey songs I actually like. But I mean, you talk about an iconic 80s soundtrack. I mean, this is it. This is really top of the heap, and I was really happy to find it too. It's such a great movie. And one that, I didn't really pay attention to a lot of the music from until I got this soundtrack. And I started listening to the whole thing and I was like, you know what, that's actually pretty cool. I like that. Good soundtrack. Moving on here to more, this one doesn't technically qualify as a 1980s soundtrack, but the man scored most of the decade with his horror films, John Carpenter's anthology. This is basically what he did here is he went back and he redid his classic themes for his movies, and this is a great record, which I'll probably go into more detail in another video, but In the Mouth of Madness, Assault on Precinct 13, The Fog, Prince of Darkness, Escape from New York. Oh, you talk about like the best themes of the 80s. Just so cool. That synth, you do noise is just so cool. I love John Carpenter's music, and this was good to get. I really love listening to this record, and I'm glad he did it too, because his soundtracks are very hard to come by, at least when it comes to the scores. So it's very cool to finally get that copy, and to finally get to enjoy that music. Very, very cool. A lot of people's favorite film from the 80s, and I love that this still has the original sticker on it. The Breakfast Club, amazing soundtrack. Sure to clear out the room, as they said on Futurama. But this is a fantastic soundtrack to an incredible film. And another one I was just so happy to find. And again, loan for promotional. Who was selling these records? They weren't supposed to be sold. But this so cool. Fire in the Twilight, Waiting, We're Not Alone. And of course, Simple Minds, Don't You Forget About Me. Oh, the 80s right here, man. Fantastic album. Very cool. This one, I was really surprised that it was the 1980s. I thought it was 79 or even earlier, but I guess it's not. And that is the soundtrack to The Blues Brothers, another great film here with Belushi and Aykroyd. The guys own the decade, man. Well, I mean, Aykroyd did essentially, Belushi not so much. Yeah, sad, but you know, still cool. This is an amazing film, great soundtrack to boot, and just the people they have on here: Aretha Franklin, Ray Charles, Cab Calloway. This is a fantastic record, and one that I see a lot. And I don't think it's been in reissue yet, so if you see this, definitely pick it up, because it's a good one. This is not my parents' copy, though. This is not theirs, so they still have theirs, so you got that going for you, Dad. So another iconic film from the 80s here, Back to the Future. Great soundtrack here with Huey Lewis and the News. When I saw this movie as a kid, it blew my mind. I was just like, that is the coolest car ever. I just love that opening sequence with the car and everything. I was like, more car. I didn't care anything else about the movie. I just cared about the car. And I just thought it was so cool. Another great soundtrack that combines a little bit of the score at the very end with all the singles that came off of here. Power of Love, great song. Out of Time. Another one comes with all of the original stuff here. Very, very cool. Great record. Awesome 80s film. This is one my dad's going to freak out when I show this off. This is Streets of Fire. This is an incredible movie. It's out there. Maybe I shouldn't say incredible. I think I give a lot of these movies more credit than they deserve. But Streets of Fire, it's pretty good. It's a good cult classic with a lot of music by a lot of great people on here. Fire Inc., Maria McGee, Dan Hartman, The Fix, the Blasters are on here. I mean, what can you say? This is a fantastic record. And another one, they weren't supposed to sell it, but somehow it ended up in my hands. Great movie by Walter Hill. They just had a reissue by Shout Factory, so definitely have to check that out. A lot of the music, I think, was done by, and don't quote me on this, but I thought some of the music was done by Jim Steinman of Meatloaf fame, but I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. Great soundtrack, really fantastic stuff, but very much in the style of Meatloaf, I guess I would say. Bombastic, cool, rock and roll fable. And that cover, I mean, that's just cool. You know, the girl hanging off a guy, he's got his coat, he's got his shotgun. It's like, oh man, that's cool. That's epic right there. Very, very cool. Moving on to one of my fiance's favorite films, Stand By Me. Great film. An awesome cover too. This was one. Again, I told myself if I ever saw it, I had to get it. A lot of great stuff from obviously the 50s on here, and very cool photos on the back. This is such a great film, and one that I think really kind of exemplifies how good of a writer Stephen King is, because he can go after really any genre and make it work. And not only that, but Rob Reiner doing a fantastic job in that film. And on the soundtrack, he combines it so perfectly. And what I love about this is that it has, let's see here, I thought this had dialogue on there. Maybe it doesn't. I thought it did, because I thought it had the Pez discussion on here. But, I mean, what a movie. What a cool soundtrack here. Again, I think this is the third time I've talked about this. AC/DC, Who Made Who, for the Maximum Overdrive soundtrack. Amazing soundtrack, amazing movie of the 80s. The 80s were kind of like, oh, all this cool new technology, but what if it broke loose and tried to kill you? And that's the concept of that movie. Let's go ahead and bust through this one again. Queen's A Kind of Magic, another great 80s soundtrack for two films. Iron Eagle and Highlander. I consider it more a soundtrack to Highlander, but, whatever. Fantastic album. Was happy to get it on reissue. Just because I haven't seen a vintage copy, and very cool. And also that cover just kind of really screams 80s, doesn't it? Moving on here. the sequel to the Rocky Horror Picture Show, Shock Treatment. What if Rocky Horror had been made in the 80s? Well, you would get this. And, I used to say, the soundtrack is really good, the movie sucks, but the soundtrack's really good. I like the soundtrack, but it's a very much an acquired taste. I do like it. Richard O'Brien, God bless him, he created some fantastic music. But this movie is just absolute garbage. It's so unbelievably bad. And you think about it, you think, oh, cool, another Rocky Horror, with the same, writer and everything. Oh, it's gotta be great. And it just, oh man, it is a stinker. But the music is pretty good. So I recommend, if anything, from it, the soundtrack. Very good stuff here. Wow. Talk about one of the most iconic, I know I keep using that word a lot, one of the best 80s soundtracks, probably number one in my opinion, Purple Rain by Prince. So good! This is just an amazing album. Every track on here is just a home run. It is an incredible album. Just the imagery on it and everything about it. This still has the poster with it. This has the sleeve. Thank you, Mom and Dad, for preserving this for me. This is so great. This is one that's in reissue right now. In various colors and things like that, but I'm one of the only kids on the block that says, hey, I got an original Purple Rain, so very cool. I like that. Another film soundtrack here. Again, one I was so sure was from the 70s, but I was wrong. Raiders of the Lost Ark, John Williams. I mean, what can you say? The man is a genius, and one of the most iconic film scores, marches of all times, that Raiders March. It's just, it's so good. And that artwork, it's all summed up in that photo. You got the guys coming down, you got the snakes, you got the truck, you got Indy up there. I mean, it's just so cool. And I'm not big on a lot of film scores because I have to really justify it to buy it. But this is one you can just put it on and just see the movie in your head. That's how good it is. And another one, no question, I had to get it when I saw it, and I have not seen this since. So it was a good buy when I found that. This one I actually just got today, and I had heard a lot about it. This one ends up on a lot of lists. This is the soundtrack to Porkies Revenge. You know what you're thinking, like, why would you want that? But apparently the music in here is really, really good. And they're actually, I mean, you've got George Harrison on here. So, what? It's like very interesting. So I'm excited to take a listen to this one. You've also got Jeff Beck, the Fabulous Thunderbirds. I mean, Carl Perkins is on here, Willie Nelson. So it can't be that bad. I remember the movie being pretty terrible. They used to show these on Sunday afternoon on Comedy Central. They were always showing, they were never showing the original Porky's. They were always showing like one of the horrible sequels. And I remember it being not that great. So yeah, hopefully this soundtrack fares a little bit better. Another one I talked about in my horror movie video, the Return of the Living Dead soundtrack. This is one, again, I've seen it once, I bought it, this is what I wanted, it's so cool. The Cramps, 45 to the Grave. I mean, the Cramps alone on here, it's so worth it. Surfin' Dead, great song. Party Time, just the ultimate 80s horror theme. You know, the zombies, they're coming back, they want to eat brains, and they want to party. It's like, yeah, that I wouldn't mind being turned into one of these zombies. That's cool. You got Tar Man in here. So cool. Brains is so amazing. And a fantastic 80s zombie film. You know, it's the perfect mix of horror and comedy and awesome rock and roll. Fantastic soundtrack right there. Moving from John Williams a couple records ago to, who was this? This was James Horner. Did a number of my favorite soundtracks, including Aliens, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. Fantastic soundtrack here. Very mystifying, yet industrial, yet majestic. It's all over the place, but it works, you know. And it's so hard to find a film soundtrack that does that full scope of really kind of evoking every kind of emotion that it can from the audience. And this is just such a beautiful soundtrack. This is just a symphonic piece on its own. And interestingly enough, Horner actually took some of this soundtrack and used it in the Aliens soundtrack, which is probably why I like that soundtrack too. But this is another great one, Wrath of Khan, and an 80s film to boot. you did not have a soul if you didn't cry when Spock died. You know, that was... I'm sorry. I miss Spock. And I miss Leonard Nimoy too, you know. But yeah, sad stuff. Moving on to another one I got today. I'm talking about a lot of records I got today. Today was a very 80s day for me, if you couldn't tell. This is The Goonies. The Goonies. Amazing 80s film. This was probably the first 80s film I really, really fell in love with. What can you say? Kids hunting for pirate treasure in Astoria, Oregon. It just starts off, you know, with such great humor, and my sister and I go back and forth still with dialogue from this movie. Chunk, the single greatest film character of all time. It's so great. I love this movie so much, and the music, I mean, it's so incredible here. It's an incredible just snapshot of that time period, and I love the soundtrack, especially on a rainy day. You put on this music, and it's so cool, and I'm so happy to find a vinyl copy of this. I'm looking for the score too, because the score is really incredible. There's a little bit on here, but this is a great soundtrack, and the fantastic cover. Goonies, epitome of the 80s, man, amazing. Miami Vice. This one took me so by surprise. I got this in the bargain bin, and I thought, you know, whatever, it'll have some cool instrumentals. This is like one of my favorite records. I don't know why. It's so great. It's got In the Air Tonight, Smuggler's Blues, On the Night, just like so many, and the instrumentals on this are so good. They're so 80s. It's so crunchy. I love it. I don't know what it is. I love this record. I love this music. It's so 80s. It's so trashy. It's just, so good. I think they did like 2 more volumes of Miami Vice music, so I'm always on the lookout for those. You don't get more 80s than Miami Vice. You really don't. It's so cool, kind of unrelated, but also kind of related. There is a ice cream shop in Kansas City called Miami Ice. So pretty cool to see what they did there. And you can guess this. Again, boom, not for retail sale. I don't know who is selling these records. Okay, we're getting down to the bottom of the bin here, but not in the terms of quality here. The Lost Boys soundtrack. Another great 80s horror film right here. Horror, teen, comedy. It's got Feldman in it. It's got both Coreys in it. That's so 80s right here. Oh my god, it's such a great gothic rock everything soundtrack. Cry Little Sister. That's such a good song, and there have been plenty of cover versions of it, but the one on this is my absolute favorite. This was given to me by my fiance Holly for I think it was our first Christmas together, and it has not left my heart ever since. So thank you very much, Holly. My sister loves this movie. She really fell in love with it very early on, and it's sad because I was always like, oh, my sister likes it, so I wouldn't like it. So it took me a long time to actually watch it, and I was just like, where have you been all my life? You were an amazing soundtrack. I just don't like that cover. I feel it should just be the poster, but whatever, still good. All right, getting down to it here, we've got a couple others here. Again, another one I've talked about a lot, the heavy metal soundtrack. Another great one that's a snapshot of the music of the time. A lot of great, not only heavy metal, obviously, music on here, but you've got Devo on here a couple times. You've got Grand Funk Railroad, Sammy Hagar with his version of the title track, Black Sabbath, awesome record. Very much a metalhead's guide to the 80s right here. And the iconography on this sucker is just so great. I mean, the imagery in this movie just screams 1980s, and I love that, you know, when they launched the car into space, this was the first thing that came to my mind was, yeah, Radar Rider from the opening of Heavy Metal, and I even watched them back to back, you know, I was like, yeah, that's pretty much it. So yeah, great 80s trash right there. Bit of a rare one here with Gremlins soundtrack. This is a 7-cut mini album. I guess they didn't really have enough to build the whole thing here. This has one of my favorite Peter Gabriel songs on here, Out Out, which is a fantastic song, and I can't find a good digital copy of it, so whatever. And then you've got some stuff by Jerry Goldsmith on here. Did some great, you know, kind of hoppy music to this one, but this was an amazing film, 1984, and you know, not really known for its soundtrack, but the little bits they put on here are very, very good. So I dig that. I think that's great. I'm going to close it up here with the epic of the 1980s, Labyrinth by David Bowie. It's just the ultimate 80s fantasy film. It was definitely way ahead of its time. And what I love about this album is not only does it include all of the music by Bowie, but it also includes the music by Trevor Jones on here, who did a fantastic job, very much in the vein of what Mark Knopfler did on, Mark Knopfler, I don't know how you say it, of what he did with The Princess Bride, which is another great soundtrack that I'm on the lookout for. But this one, I was so happy when it went back into reissue, because this is one of the rarest albums when it comes to 80s soundtracks, and they reproduced everything. They reproduced the sleeve and the artwork and everything, and it just sounds amazing. It's so good. This is one I would still consider getting if I found a vintage copy, just because it's that cool. Yeah, the 80s were an interesting time where they really put a lot more thought, it seems, into creating soundtracks that could stand on their own. You didn't necessarily have to watch the film to get the beauty of the music, which is so cool. Anyway, that's all I have in my 80s record collection. I will see you guys next time.